After my husband died, his kids said, "We want the estate, the business, everything." My lawyer begged me to fight. I said, "Give it all to them." Everyone thought I'd lost my mind. At the final hearing, I signed the papers. The kids smiled until their lawyer turned pale when he read, "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." They thought they were stripping a young widow blind, exploiting the fact that I was decades younger than their father. They stood there in their designer suits, smirking at my defeat, entirely unaware that every single piece of paper I just signed was a legally binding financial death sentence. They wanted everything, so I gave them exactly what they asked for. They just didn't realize what everything actually meant. The funeral flowers were still fresh, their heavy, suffocating scent lingering in the quiet air of the estate office, when they decided to destroy me. My name is Kasia, and my husband, Julian Vance, a brilliant logistics mogul, had passed away just 3 days prior. I sat quietly behind Julian's massive mahogany desk, the same desk where we had spent countless evenings planning our future together. The chair still felt like his, but the room had already grown ice cold. The heavy office doors flew open, and Julian's estranged adult children stepped inside, bringing the coldness with them. Garrick, 42, wore an expensive, tailored suit like armor, his dark eyes filled with sharp calculation. Beside him stood his sister, Linnea, 39, her arms crossed, her face tightly wrapped in synthetic sympathy that didn't even reach her eyes. Behind them was their corporate lawyer, a rigid man carrying a thick manila folder. They didn't come to grieve, they came to conquer. Garrick stepped forward, his tone dripping with patronizing arrogance. "Kasia," he said bluntly, "let's not pretend you belong here. You were just a temporary spouse, an outsider who benefited from our father's wealth." Linnea nodded coldly in agreement. Without a hint of shame, they demanded full control of the estate, our luxury properties, and the entire logistics empire. They stared down at me, fully convinced that a grieving 27-year-old widow would be an easy target to push completely out of the family legacy. My attorney, Vance Prescott, leaned over the desk, his voice a tense, urgent whisper. "Kasia, you cannot do this. You have to fight them. Julian's original estate documents clearly favor you. If we go to court, we will win." He was right legally, but as he spoke, my eyes fell on a small, leather-bound private notebook peeking out from the bottom drawer of Julian's desk. It was Julian's personal journal, written in his precise, neat handwriting during his final months. While Garrick and Linnea were busy whispering to their lawyer, I quietly opened it. What I saw inside made my breath catch. It wasn't a diary of memories. It was a highly detailed record of hidden liabilities, massive financial manipulation, and incredibly dangerous corporate exposure buried deep within the logistics business structure. Julian hadn't just run an empire. He had been holding back a collapsing dam of toxic debt and pending regulatory fines that he had carefully kept isolated from our personal assets. Suddenly, a strange feeling of clarity washed over me. The vultures wanted the crown, but they had absolutely no idea that the crown was wired to an explosive. I looked up from the notebook, meeting Vance's worried gaze. I closed the journal slowly, a calm smile touching my lips. "No, Vance," I whispered quietly, making sure my voice carried no hesitation. "Instruct their legal team to draft the paperwork. Give them exactly what they want. Comply with every single demand." Vance stared at me in absolute shock, thinking grief had completely broken my mind. But I knew exactly what I was doing. I was gracefully stepping aside, and allowing the greedy heirs to inherit every single hidden burden buried inside the empire. I sat alone in the quiet house as the midnight oil burned, reflecting deeply on the wonderful years I had shared with Julian. But as I prepared for the final legal transfer, I used that quiet time to look deeper into the digital archives his journal had pointed me toward. What I uncovered was absolutely staggering. I found the full, undeniable extent of Garrick and Linnea's past financial misconduct within the logistics company. While Julian had been alive, they had been systematically draining accounts. Julian had quietly documented ironclad evidence of their embezzlement, reckless corporate spending, and fraudulent financial behavior. He had kept it hidden to protect the family name, but he had kept everything. As I reviewed the spreadsheets and hidden ledgers, a brilliant realization hit me. By aggressively demanding absolute ownership of the estate and the entire business, the heirs were not just taking the titles. Legally, they were also absorbing the massive, hidden liabilities that came with them. Julian had carefully contained a toxic web of cross-collateralized debt, severe tax exposure, and imminent legal risks that were ready to detonate. If I fought them, those debts would bleed into my inheritance. But if I surrendered the business entirely, the burden transferred automatically to the new owners. Before you hear how their lawyer reacted when he discovered this, take a second to subscribe, follow my story until the end, and comment below with the city or country you are watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled. With Vance's help, I spent the rest of the night preparing the final legal structure for the transfer documents. We didn't change their demands. We simply ensured that they would inherit everything they greedily asked for, including the crushing consequences. The morning of the final hearing arrived, and the atmosphere inside the formal corporate legal chamber was heavy and clinical. The room was dominated by a large, polished glass table surrounded by high-backed leather chairs, looking more like a battlefield than a place of law. Garrick and Linnea arrived radiating absolute confidence, practically floating with an aura of unearned victory. They were accompanied by their high-powered attorney, Thaddeus Crane, a man whose reputation for ruthless corporate restructuring preceded him. The heirs wore smug, triumphant expressions, clearly believing that the final outcome was already secured and that they had successfully stripped me of my dignity and my home. I sat across from them, wearing a simple black dress, playing the role of the grieving, defeated young widow perfectly. I kept my shoulders slumped and my eyes downcast, letting them believe their aggressive tactics had broken my spirit. Vance Prescott sat beside me, keeping his expression entirely neutral as he laid out the thick stack of transfer documents. Garrick didn't even try to hide his smirk as he slid a sleek gold pen across the table toward me. Without a single word of protest, objection, or hesitation, I picked up the pen. With a steady hand, I signed over the entire estate, the full business ownership of the logistics empire, our luxury properties, and every ounce of corporate control. I watched as Linnea leaned back in her chair, a quiet, malicious laugh escaping her lips as she exchanged a victorious look with her brother. They were entirely convinced they had successfully removed me from Julian's legacy, leaving me with nothing but a few personal belongings. They had no idea they had just walked right into an open cage. The stack of freshly signed transfer documents was pulled to the other side of the glass table for final approval. Thaddeus Crane, adjusting his glasses, picked up the pages with the practiced ease of a man about to finalize a corporate execution. Garrick and Linnea leaned forward, their eyes locked on the paperwork, practically drooling over the multi-million-dollar empire that was now officially theirs. But as Crane turned to the final addendum page, the specific ironclad clause that Vance and I had quietly inserted, his methodical reading suddenly stopped. His arrogant posture went completely rigid. I watched closely as his eyes darted back and forth across the legal text, his brows furrowing in deep confusion that rapidly spiraled into pure panic. The smug smirk vanished from his face as if it had been slapped off. He reached the crucial clause that legally, permanently bound the new majority owners to all associated corporate debt, hidden operational liabilities, and immediate regulatory penalties tied directly to the inherited logistics entities. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The estate was not a golden prize. It was a massive, carefully engineered financial collapse package. The moment the full legal meaning sank into his mind, the color drained entirely from his face. His hands began to visibly tremble, and he froze solid in his chair. He looked up at Garrick and Linnea with a gaze of absolute, unadulterated horror. He realized that in their desperate rush to strip a grieving widow of her home, his greedy clients hadn't just secured an empire, they had just signed their names into irreversible financial and legal ruin. A heavy, suffocating panic exploded across the room the moment Thaddeus Crane dropped his pen. "What is it?" Garrick demanded, his voice cracking through the silence. Crane looked at his clients, his lips trembling. "You can't reverse this. You just signed for everything. The debt, the fraud penalties, the toxic loans, It's all yours now." Linnea shrieked, slamming her hands onto the glass table, demanding that the paperwork be torn up. But it was far too late. The legal transfer was complete, binding, and absolute. While chaos erupted around me, I remained entirely calm. What the greedy heirs never bothered to check was that Julian had protected me long ago. Years before his illness, he had established a separate, private offshore trust solely in my name, loaded with millions in clean, liquid assets. The houses and the logistics company were nothing but a beautifully painted trap. As we stood up to leave, the immediate financial consequences began to activate. Right outside the legal chamber, Garrick's phone began buzzing violently. The banks and federal auditors, triggered by the change in corporate ownership, were already freezing their personal accounts and calling in the massive buried liabilities attached to the business empire. I gathered my coat, looking at the two people who had called me a penniless outsider just an hour ago. I didn't say a single word, nor did I need to. I walked out of the room without any confrontation, leaving the doors wide open as the entire system collapsed around them. 3 months later, I sit on the balcony of my new home, watching the waves gently crash against the shore. I have completely rebuilt my life in perfect peace, living independently and comfortably away from that toxic family dynamic. The greedy heirs are currently drowning in messy bankruptcy proceedings and heavy federal scrutiny, desperately trying to survive the crushing corporate debts they demanded. I remain entirely untouched, safe within the fortress of my protected trust. Greed is a blinding force. It makes people grab for the crown without ever checking if it's on fire. What would you have done if you found yourself in my position? Would you have fought them in court, or let them destroy themselves? Comment your thoughts below.